So I've been telling you that the condition of the Ukrainian military, regardless of what they're showing on the media in the United States, you've already read the reports about how basically the US have been lying fantastically and the press have been carrying those lies. And so oftentimes these farcical stories, 100,000 Russians have died. Okay, sure. I mean, for that could matter, they don't even talk about it in the context of a civil war, which is what it is. Eastern Ukrainians are fighting Western Ukrainians. The Russian joined in at the point where it became clear that the Ukrainian military was basically going to try to recapture that region. They had already killed up to 14,000 people. So there was that. But oftentimes I've made this point about how they are losing. And the loss is material, manpower. Oftentimes when you're looking at the reports, you're seeing these guys riding around in civilian vehicles, which is indicative of them basically not having the military vehicles. And I've even been reading reports talking about these guys walking because, again, they didn't have the equipment. The equipment was basically being destroyed. And when you're looking at the numbers from both sides, Ukrainian numbers are farcical. 2,000 people have died. 15,000 Russians have died, though, according to Ukraine. And of course, what number is the U.S. going to print uncritically? That number. They've been saying farcical stuff. Even the ghost of Kiev took down 30,000 Russian jets with one tank of gas. That stuff. And the media reports it. The ghost of Kiev. Look how great this guy is. And then you find out later, oh, yeah, we lied about that to boost morale. The thing is, much of what is coming out in Western media is entirely to boost morale. No more, no less. And it is to keep you believing that there is some chance, some semblance of a chance for Ukraine to win that war because they want to keep putting weapons and money into that country to fight to the last dead Ukrainian. We're going to get kids. We're going to send them out there to fight Russians. We're going to get old men. We're going to send them out there to fight Russians. Because basically the people who would be the fighting age, those people are getting killed. This is not a good situation. If the reality and the honesty of what was taking place was explained to the American public, this notion of sending $30 billion to a losing war is utterly astonishing. And the notion that the president of the United States, with people getting hit with record levels of inflation, is spending billions in Ukraine. Utterly astonishing. And yet this is where we are. And so it is vitally important that you don't call it a civil war. It is vitally important that you don't explain the context of the U.S. knocking over the government, the Yanukovych government, in 2014. You can't explain that stuff. The moment you explain that stuff, public muddies their thinking. And muddying the thinking, context, is not something that helps and aids when you just want to dump a bunch of money into a country for a geopolitical project that started 40 years ago, give or take. The Ukrainian military is getting crushed. I'm not saying they're not killing Russians. They are. I am making the point that in comparison between the equipment losses from the standpoint of the Ukrainians versus that of the Russians, or the manpower losses versus that of the Russians, the Ukrainians seem to be getting the worst of it. And there are reports now from embedded journalists that makes that much clearer when you're basically listening to the reports that these guys are coming out with, including a Western publication. The Insider, this is actually a really good article by the Insider. Western publication. They are talking about two mercenaries who jumped into the country, for their words, to kill Russians. That's what they wanted to do. Where is it? Come on, right here. Great article. I'll put it at the bottom. They went to fight Russians. Chaos ensued. And basically the article is going about their journey, going about the things that they were doing, trying to get from point A to point B. How one was immature. I think one was like very young. The other one was a little bit older. But all things being equal, it was a clusterfuck. They were having a difficult time trying to find anybody to basically take them on, to basically go to war with them. No experience, for more or less. Now, they did find another guy who they ended up going with, and they did find a unit. And when they finally found that unit, they were getting training, exactly what they wanted. Everything's great. And while they're getting this training, because keep in mind, a lot of the people that were coming there, they were mercenaries, had no military experience. They had no military experience. They wanted to come and kill Russians. And just like this kind of weird Western point of view that, oh yeah, we can pass all of these sanctions on Russia and they're not going to respond at all. That weird point of view that other people basically don't exist and have minds and brains and will do certain things to mitigate the things that you're trying to do to them. They're shocked by the fact that Russians can shoot back. We're here to kill Russians. We're not here to die for them. We're not here to die for it. So they get there, right here. This is when they've been there for a little while. They've started the training. Again, many of the recruits, no experience, smoking cigarettes, all that other stuff. They're not taking it seriously. They're in a literal war zone. A war that is a semblance of what took place in the Second World War. No, not necessarily on the scale and everything else, but you have military maneuvers, you have tanks, you have a war. This is real. This is not a video game. You decided to jump into Ukraine in order to kill Russians. And it just so happens that Russians have better technology, better logistics, more materials, etc., etc., etc. Not only are you on the losing side of history, you're also on the losing side of a war. This is what insiders are saying, right here. Within 3 days, doubt had begun to set in. There wasn't any time for questions or enough equipment for hands-on practice. Many of the recruits weren't taking the training seriously and were smoking cigarettes during drills. Again, they're in a war. The training that you're getting is literally there to save your life. What are these people thinking? Let's keep going. Now, the reason I'm showing this is because there were reports that came out that were saying that Western mercenaries were basically being used for cannon fodder, and that they were being kind of pushed out and being used as the front troops to go out first in order to get shot. And of course, the West is like, oh, that's not true. We don't do that. That's not what's happening. That's just Russian propaganda, etc., etc. Okay, is it Russian propaganda? Coming from this clearly Russian source, the insider. That afternoon, Newman pulled Tobias, Kevin, and a few others aside. He whispered urgently that he had overheard some of the Ukrainian officers talking behind their backs. Officers were referring to the recruits like them, those without combat training but with a will to fight, have no ability to fight, but I got the will, want to kill Russians. And right here, behind their backs, officers were referring to recruits like them, those without training but with a will to fight, as cannon fodder and mine meat. They'd be used to open up the battlefield and test their enemy's capabilities before risking more valuable, better trained troops, he said. With tears streaming down his face, he urged the men to leave. Think about that. It is a rational act, is it not? It is shrewd, yes. Cynical, yes. But understand, you are in a war. Do you really have time to care about this being a cynical approach? Or this being somewhat of a shrewd, calculating approach that is going to get somebody killed? Do you care about that in the context of your life or your other Ukrainian lives that you're basically fighting with, that you believe at the very least are better soldiers than these guys who come into this country knowing dick about what is going on in this particular conflict? Does it make sense? Is it rational? Regardless of how it sounds, is it rational? And the answer is, of course, yes. Of course it is. These guys have no training, and they're going into a war. And the Ukrainian soldiers are going to give them the basics and everything else. It's not that I think they want them to die, but in the context of that guy going out versus me and my other brethren, it's better if that guy goes out. Hey, go out there. Go do something that we've trained you to do. All right, the Russians over there. Let's not go that route. I mean, it's callous, yes. But this is war. People are indiscriminately basically killing each other, left and right, openly so. And you care about somebody being callous in this situation. It's not the callousness. Life and death is at stake. This stuff is existential. Now, when they ask the Ministry of Defense for Ukraine, hey, is this true? Are you guys doing this? You guys using these people as quote-unquote cannon fodder and mine meat? What is Ukraine going to say here? Are they going to admit to that? Or are they going to say, nope, that is definitely not what we do? If you chose B, you are absolutely correct. That's not what we do. We don't do that at all. Right here. When I asked Colonel, I cannot pronounce this guy's name, but I'll show it to you. About this, he said he didn't recognize the name Newman and denied that any such attitude existed. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. Our soldiers go out arm in arm with completely unqualified and untrained soldiers, not concerned that those untrained soldiers are going to get my soldiers killed. That's not what happens at all. That's not what happens at all. One last thing. To go into another article, French article, actually, And this came out of the AFP, French news agency. So again, that Russian bastion of Russian propaganda, French news agency, AFP. The article, exhausted Ukrainian soldiers return from the Eastern Front. And basically, they were embedded with the Ukrainian military. And in being embedded with the Ukrainian military, they could basically see it for themselves. Right here. All right. Daphne Rousseau. Now, what did they see? What did they see? And some of this you have to read between the lines, where you just ask the question like, wait a minute, that sounds weird. Why are they doing that? And as you go through it, what you find is over and over again that sounds weird makes sense in the context of, oh, they're losing equipment and they're losing men. And they're losing it at such a degree that they can't replace those losses. So yes, the U.S. can send billions of dollars. They can send tanks and howitzers and all of this stuff. Now, there's going to be an issue with that stuff getting to the actual battlefront and the Ukrainians being able to train on that stuff. We have to train on stuff for like a year. And they're going to be like, okay, we're going to give you 3 days and now we're going to send you out into battle. I will tell you this, there are going to be a lot of Russians playing around with howitzers, just like they're playing around with a lot of the other stuff that have been sent over there to the Ukrainian military. This is farcical that they believe this is going to have some level of a real legitimate effect. And the effect that it is going to have is that it's going to force Russia to take action to prevent that equipment from getting anywhere near the battle zone, which means infrastructure is going to start being a target. The New York Times wrote an article, something I've been saying for God knows how long, for months now, grudgingly admitting, hey, it doesn't seem like the Russian military is bashing the hell out of Ukraine to the degree that they could do so. And they were puzzled by this, And their conclusion was, they're just incompetent. It's just sheer incompetence. It has nothing to do with them not wanting to actually destroy the country and to actually want a negotiated settlement. Nothing to do with that at all. Even though Putin says my war is not with the Ukrainians, nothing to do with that at all. The objectives that Putin set forth, nope, it's not that. He can't be telling us the truth. They're just incompetent. It's utterly absurd. I want to go through parts of this. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. This is Moon of Alabama. They do an analysis of it, and he's given this kind of military analysis of basically what is being said in the article. It's actually quite good. Right here. Let's go to the first one. Right. Come on. Which one? All right. So this is. Okay. Packed with exhausted Ukrainian soldiers that clench jaws, the truck driver drives away at full speed. The troops from the 81st Brigade have just received an order to withdraw from the Eastern Front where Russia's forces advance. The brigade walked 12 kilometers on Saturday, camouflaged in the woods and under crossfire, until the point of retreat at Svigovsk, I guess it's called. Now, first question, why are they walking? And that's what they ask. It says, as the Ukrainian troops had to walk 12 kilometers, the question arises, where were their armored carriers? Even when infantry is deployed in dugouts and trenches, and transport should always be nearby. Basically, these guys are in a war zone. And in that war zone, they're going to have to walk 12 miles. And the question is, well, wait a minute. Why do they have to walk 12 miles in the middle of a war zone? Anything could happen. They could be ambushed. They could be shot. They could be snipers. Why aren't they doing that? Well, again, this is one of those questions. Why are they doing that? It's because they are losing material at a degree that they can't replace, which is why there's such the hysteria over giving them money and materials now from the various NATO countries. And he goes into the clobber list. So right here, in total, 146 aircraft, 112 helicopters, 689 unmanned aerial vehicles, 281 anti-aircraft missile systems, 2,756 tanks and other armored combat vehicles, 316 multiple launch rocket systems, 1,234 field artillery. His point is, look, these numbers may be inflated because these are coming from the Russian side. By the same token, the fact that they don't have that equipment to use indicates that on some level, those numbers are probably true, or at the very least, closer to truth than whatever Ukraine is saying. The point is, look at what is taking place on the ground in real terms, and does it compare with the narrative that you're basically getting, these feel-good narratives. Here's another one. All right. At 21 years old, Semlov, an officer from Odessa Military Academy, finds himself managing 130 conscript, often twice his age, It's my first war. I was supposed to graduate in 4 months, but they sent me here, says the baby-faced officer with a short black beard. So this, and here's another one right here. The strength of the tank company is 31 to 40 people, and the number of servicemen a motorized rifle company ranges from 150 people. Often the company, commanded by an officer with the rank of captain, and only in some units, this position is occupied by a major. So, Junior Lieutenant Samalov, and he says, who did not finish his officer course, is leading a unit that is usually led by officers 2 to 3 ranks above his own. And he asked the question, where are the officers? That's what I mean. Like, as you're reading through Western media, sometimes it's like, you're like, hey, that sounds weird. Why is that happening? And again, the answer, those people are dead. Captured, dead, but definitely not or incapacitated, not in a situation where they can basically do their jobs. And for the other point, you have a 20-year-old, a child, basically, training 40-something-year-olds, people who, cooks, cleaners, dads, uncles, people who shouldn't be fighting under normal circumstances. And this is the guy, or these are the guys who are going to go out there and basically lead a campaign. Why are you having a baby-faced kid and old men leading campaigns for military? Where are the rest of your troops? This is kind of what I'm getting at. These are the conditions that these guys are basically encountering at this point. And the farcical number of 2,000 dead is ridiculous. I'm sorry. Whether you want to believe the Russian figures or not, I would say and point out that even if you're looking at Western sources in regards to the amount of materials and everything else that was lost by Ukraine, it is closer matches the Russian side of it. So both sides are going to inflate or deflate numbers depending upon how it makes them look versus, they don't necessarily want to look bad. They want to make the other side look worse. Fair enough. That has to be taken into account. But when you're reading stuff like this of people who are basically embedded in it and they're like, this is rough. This is rough. There's one more part to this. All right, right here. This is a brutal, brutal line. The AFP piece. In this brigade, like others, they don't say how many people have been killed. When the subject comes up, Samalov's gaze becomes misty. The pain is raw. A deadly silence takes over the military track during the drive to the abandoned building where the soldiers will stay during their week of rest. When the convoy passes a truck loaded with long-range missiles dashing to the front, the soldiers automatically make the V sign for victory and their fingers fixing their gaze as they move on the horizon in silence. Now, he writes right here, he adds this. Samalov's 130 men are unlikely to be from the original company. They are probably all that's left from a battalion that originally had 3 companies and more than 400 men. Which means they don't have the ability to refill their battalions. This is kind of the point that I'm trying to drive home here. This is not indicative of victory. This is not indicative of doing well. And the image that they're crafting in the United States and the Western nations is the exact opposite of what people are saying who is on the ground with that military. That's the point that I'm trying to make. That if the American public fully understood that this is a losing war, which is the reason why the media doesn't talk about it in those terms. And the reason that Biden will come out and say, we're going to do victory. And then Zelensky, who puts out peace overtures and then pulls them back when a bunch of money falls into his lap, into his pocket. This is an immoral catastrophe, to put it mildly. Not only should this not have happened, but that dirtbag is allowing this war to continue on and on and on, getting his people utterly and entirely slaughtered. It's a travesty. The point of this, though, is that Sloboda was right. That these guys were being used as cannon fodder. And that the military, Ukraine at this point, it's a rational act considering what they're going through and the number of losses that they have basically been encountering. They're saving their troops and the troops that they believe are better trained for those battles while using these guys as cannon fodder and mine meat. Like, share, subscribe. Let me see you guys a little bit later. I'll see you.